a little bit adrift starting this morning, but we've been waiting for one of our participants to log in from Cornell, where it's late in the evening. The participant being a woman, she's entitled to be slightly late. I'm afraid I find things not starting on time something that appeals to me, because I suffer from a certain degree of OCD about such things, and being compelled to suffer a little bit of unpromptness this time in the morning is good for me, I think. I'm delighted to welcome you, those of you online and those of you here, to the MRI Online Symposium Towards a New Paradigm of Economics. I'm Stephen Morgan, I'm the Rector of the University of St. Joseph, and I'm delighted that USJ is able to welcome this symposium, particularly as it's the first major symposium organised by MRI since the Macau Ricci Institute moved to our campus here at Green Island, Adelia Verde, Macau. The omphalos, the navel of the world, from which all this kind of thinking needs to emerge. That the Macau Ricci Institute is located here now is of particular importance to the university, because the Macau Ricci Institute carries in it the memory of the academic and intellectual work of the Jesuits in this part of the world over what is now 426 years since the founding of the Colegio St. Paul as an institute of higher education here in Macau in 1594. And so it's a physical manifestation of a continuity that is very, very important. I wanted, before you dive into the various papers, just to give you a number of preliminary thoughts on this notion of towards a new paradigm of economics. And I want to set it within the context of a scholastic maxim, the maxim agere sequitur esse, doing follows being. Some of you know that I did my doctorate on a 19th century thinker, and one of the most unpleasant parts of that was immersing myself in the history of ideas in the 19th century. And one of the things that I noticed very, very strongly coming through there was an inversion of that maxim. Doing suddenly became the way in which you defined being. And we see this particularly in the field of economics, in the arrival of terms such as socialism, a term that appears first in French, cited in about 1832, and in English a couple of years later, and capitalism, a word that doesn't appear until 1854. And of course it's from that period of isms that we got Marxism and Leninism and all other kinds of ideologies. It seems to me, reflecting upon what might be a new paradigm for economics, that we have to go behind isms, perhaps to states of being. States of being such as solidarity. I see there's a paper later from José Miguel Encarnação on solidarity as a key to economics and social justice. As the Macau Ricci Institute has arrived here at USJ, we've been thinking of setting up a research institute around memory and identity, and much of the thinking for the constitution of that has reflected upon the concept of the human person in the thought of John Paul II. And John Paul II talks about the human being and the human person as irreducible. Irreducible beyond their subjectiveness, their subjectivity, as a reflection of their sacredness being made in the image and likeness of God. And I want to say today that if we're going to develop a new paradigm for economics, It needs to put back at the centre of the consideration not isms, not political and economic ideologies, but the reality of the human person. Hilaire Belloc, a British thinker, well, a French and British thinker, it's quite difficult with Belloc to determine whether he's being the son of his father or the son of his mother at any particular point. But Hilaire Belloc, together with G.K. Chesterton, spent a great deal of time in the 1920s and 30s trying to suggest alternatives to what looked then like the twin Scylla and Charybdis of Marxism-Leninism on the one hand and nationalism, which turned into fascism and Nazism on the other. And they went back to looking at medieval concepts of economics. They came up with some slightly romantic views that perhaps may not have worked had they ever been tried. But what they had in common was a notion that the human person, rather than the means of exchange, was the measure of wealth in a society. The thriving of the human person, rather than the accumulation of units of economic exchange. And I'd suggest perhaps over the next 2 days, we ought to perhaps keep that in mind as an authentically Christian, an authentically human way of looking at economics. Unfortunately, when this symposium was originally planned, we didn't have a pandemic, and we expected all to be here, and our speakers expected to be here, enjoying the lovely autumn weather of Macau. Sadly, we have a pandemic, and we're all having to participate online. I had 2 days blocked out of my diary so that I could sit here and enjoy the papers, but in the words of a 1950s British Prime Minister, events, dear boy, events. So that was Harold Macmillan on being asked what the problem with Suez was. At the end of Stephan's opening remarks in a moment, I'm going to have to leave you, but I will pop back in, and if I haven't spoken to you, please come and say hello to me. So, Stephan, I think that's all I really want to say. Is that enough?
Yeah, wonderful.
Really good. Good. I'm going to sit there and then skip out.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen, very much indeed for this lovely introduction. Zosan, magandang umaga, buenos dias, good morning, Chuweihao. So I'm really delighted also to follow up on Stephen's remark and consider this online symposium as a really true chance for us to respond to a very challenging call of Pope Francis, who challenged us some couple of months ago to consider how to change the economic paradigm from this profit maximization to a paradigm more geared to the benefit of the larger society and the common good. Of course, I was hoping to go to Assisi in March. All coronavirus turned that upside down, and this conference, which was conceived for March, will take place in November, also as an online symposium, with Pope Francis confirming his presence. And indeed, I must also on a personal note say, this is what I struggle since over 20 years. When you appear in a business school, teaching about business ethics, you feel like a fig leaf, just maybe a cheap excuse, but the overall paradigm goes in another direction. So let me just really briefly outline what aim we have in mind to attempt trying to change this paradigm. First, and I think that's also very much in Pope Francis' mind, we will have a spiritual conversation in mind and link this with the wisdom traditions and the mindset of solidarity. Already, as Stephen mentioned, John Paul II has outlined with his 3 social encyclical letters very much what is subsidiarity, solidarity all about. And the ideals animating the new paradigm are shared broadly across faith and philosophies. So, with this upcoming event, which will gather also prominent economists and Nobel Prize winners like Amartya Sen, Jeffrey Sachs, Muhammad Yunus, many people, especially the young economists, were involved in this struggle. I would say it's a bloody struggle. You can never claim a cheap victory. Another second major element is self-empowerment of the poor and subsidiarity. I would already anticipate that I also call him a Nobel Prize winner like Muhammad Yunus and Rousseau will be with us. Some of us have worked with him. He's the founder of credit unions. And with the example of credit unions in Africa, Hong Kong, and all over Asia, you have already a kind of model in a nutshell what the new paradigm kind of should look like, challenging the old-fashioned neoclassical paradigm of economics and its exclusive reliance on the supposed rational self-interest firm maximizing profits in service to its shareholders. But the neoclassical model of economics is now fading under its failure to describe adequately the reality of economic life or to motivate stakeholders with appeals beyond their immediate self-interest or to address challenges that threaten the very survival of the human race. I also pin hope on this crisis of the pandemic, that people wake up, that this can be a chance we should not miss in a maybe cynical mindset. The third aim we want to achieve is finance and economics redesigned for the common good and justice. So what is the shape of that more ethical way of doing business concretely? While this effort to discern a new paradigm draws inspiration from Pope Francis, as well as the rich tradition of Catholic social teaching, Reverend Rector already was referring to, we need to come up with a concrete action plan of the new paradigm of economics. So therefore, the method we have chosen for this conference is the TAT method. You, I think, all are familiar with the thematic apperception test. So we asked all the participants not just to offer their views, but to pick in each other paper's 3 points. So it's just not what we have seen in these useless debates. Everybody steps in and sells his own baloney, literally understood, but we try to listen to each other. And from there, at least have a solid summary, and we know this, for instance, are the points this restricted number of, say, 50 plus people came up with, or in a more ambitious way, we may attempt to have a manifesto. So we have also a friend from Wales, Mike Thompson, will help us then to put together all these points and see if this could be a manifesto, and the organizing committee of the Assisi conference would consider this manifesto, or say maybe summary of the main points, as a main reference for the conference, which will take place from November 19 to 21. Now, the final, of course, point we want to achieve, as we welcome our Vice Rector, Alvaro Barbosa, is, of course, the environmental protection and prudence in the line of Laudato Si, the encyclical letter, which again not just stresses environmental protection, but also the spiritual implication of it. So we will feature key experiences and the social analysis from social workers and social scientists who are working to integrate marginalized people, drug addicts, orphans within the real economy and a system to get a job. Now here we must say we also have some linguistic barriers. I was so pleased when one of our most prominent Jesuit social scientists, Friedhelm Hengsbach, described case studies with gypsies, how to get them out of criminal behavior, get them a job. But he admitted, sorry, I must admit I'm not fluent enough in English to discuss this, but we have marvelous case studies on the gypsies in Romania. So, and I think it was also very timely that Pope Francis has outlined on Saturday the 3rd of October an encyclical letter also with the key points what we want to achieve. I just also briefly touch on some key points he raises in his letter, where also he insists on the biblical foundation of it. Say, in the oldest text of the Bible, we find a reason why our hearts should expand to embrace the foreigner. This will be, by the way, our first input, hopefully, that our professor from Cornell will appear, maybe as a virtual presentation. We have, when she speaks about debordering, there are solid biblical references we have always to continue to explore. Or this call for fraternal love echoes throughout the New Testament, as Francis points out. The whole law is summed up in a single commandment: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. It's the first time we make it online, so I also thought we do it first on a smaller scale, and I think the main idea is first you really should relax. Zoom is easy to handle. Even I can handle it, so you should feel reassured. It's easy to handle, and now the gold standard Harvard Business School also uses Zoom. So it's really wonderful to handle, and just keep two main things in mind. When you don't speak, you mute yourself on the bottom, on the left bottom downside. And when you make a presentation, you have downside in a green color, the bottom, which allows you to share the screen. So very easy, then you kind of can present your PowerPoint presentation. So, and you have seen we have an extremely rich program for both days, and I think we feel all honored that Professor Christine Leuenberger, who just published a book with Oxford University Press on maps in Israel, in Palestine, will be with us. So, technique, is she there? Okay. So then in this case we thought we make a little change. We have her virtual presentation, and I promise it's extremely interesting, these borders and de-borders in Israel and Palestine. And this is actually a case. This professor is roaming around in very dangerous regions of the world. Now she's nailed out in Ithaca, in Cornell University. She should enjoy this break. And as we hope she may appear, we thought that we start with the editor of Au Clarim, José Miguel Encarnação, who speaks about solidarity as a key for economic and social justice. I also want to thank Mr. Encarnação and Oclarim as they consistently reported on our effort last time with the conference we had on environmental protection with the government of Macau. And so, is there any from our technical team? I also want to introduce, I'm glad that Father Jaroslav Duraj, the Vice Director, assists me. He is a technical wizard. I really want to be sure we are in safe hands technically, as well as my team, dedicated team. The main master here is Barry, our IT guru, and Brian. And the way it also is that whenever you want to make a comment, also all kind of nasty comments also are welcome, you can place them on the chat room. And then our wizards will gather them. And we also very much appreciate that you are here now. If you prefer to kind of write your nasty or benevolent comments, you write it just on a paper, and then Father Duraj will then digest it, he will prioritize it, and then so we proceed. Anything else we need to know concerning technical details? Again, we want to thank Reverend Stephen Morgan very much indeed, and also Vice Rector Alvaro Barbosa. You have really strongly supported the move that we could now finally be hosted here as Macau Ricci Institute. We very much appreciate, and you have seen we have a marvelous lineup of 30 really top scholars, I think, and also to honor your trust and support. So thanks very, very much indeed. And now we proceed with the editor of Oclarim, José Miguel Encarnação, also because the time is short. Each one has by now received the bio. We don't waste our time with the panegyric and long introduction to each one. So we just leave aside all the titles. Many have multiple honorary doctorates. We forget about this baloney and just start now with José Miguel Encarnação. Thank you very much.